We answered the 911 calls all through 94, 95, 96. So it gave me a taste of what emergency medicine was. And that's a whole nother book, a whole nother webinar, because the
Yeah.
atrocities that I saw answering the 911 calls in one of the biggest cities in the country was horrific. There was just so much going on, and I had trained as hard as I could so that I can always know at any moment what to do when I needed to do it. Because sometimes when you're in an emergency situation, you start to become dumb because that fight or flight kicks in, and now you're in more of an instinctual response instead of an intelligent, contemplative response. So I learned as much as I could so that I can save a life without freezing up. Because that's when you're in a tragedy and a drama and a lot of trauma going on around you, or even a car accident or a mass casualty. Sometimes you get a little nervous, fear kicks in, and you forget stuff. So I was definitely good at what I did. But what I discovered that they didn't teach me in school was that I would lose more people than I would be able to save.
Yeah.
So that means it had nothing to do with the skills that I had. It had to do with the fact that they were so far into disease progression, disease degeneration, that a few life-saving measures was not going to help them. And at that point, I got burned out because in Chicago, we had a heat wave in 1996 where hundreds of people were dying just because it was just so hot. It was like a heat wave epidemic. Well, I was out there in the ambulance, and of course, it was cool on the ambulance. But as soon as we got out the ambulance to the call, we can unfortunately smell the stench of death before we even got to the house, because by the time people called, it was too late. They were trying to get in touch with their loved ones. And so when we got the call, they wanted to find out, okay, if they were okay. So when we got there, of course, the police was there with us. So we weren't really working on any people because they were already dead, unfortunately. So they were just being body bagged out of there and sent out. So after that, I got a little burned out. And so I just left the whole medical industry because I also worked in the ER. So I worked in the ER in Chicago on the north side as well as the south side. So, and also worked with University of Chicago Hospital. And there they had the adult ER and the pediatric trauma center. So I was on both teams working with the traumas and working with the adults. So I had a lot of emergency medicine experience. So I understood the medical industry from a crisis perspective. And what I realized is that the whole industry is based upon crisis care, urgent care, immediate care, sick care. And so that was the theme of the entire system. But if that's the only system we were given, then that means that we need another system that's not causing us or conditioning us to procrastinate with our health, because that's what we're all taught to do, to procrastinate until the condition gets worse, which means that we're not really called patients because we're waiting to see the doctor. We're called patients because we're waiting until the crisis shows up. And so that's what I started discovering as I moved into holistic healthcare to become a naturopath, because a naturopath is different. It's a whole nother school of thought. It's about addressing the root cause of a health condition, but doing it in a preventative state. So holistic healthcare is about prevention, whereas allopathic medicine, which is a traditional medicine, that's about managing your crisis. So it's really two different states of mind. In disease prevention, the naturopath is addressing the root cause in order to assist the body in healing itself, because your body is a self-regulating organism. But in sometimes over time, we start to lose the ability to self-heal faster than when we were younger. And the reason that is because over time, we're building up toxicity in the body from what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're breathing, and even the people around us, even the people in our relationships. We're dealing with a lot of toxicity on a daily basis. And so what happens to that toxicity? It starts off in the beginning stages as something as simple as acne. Acne is the beginning of toxicity building up in your body. But what have we been taught to do when there's acne? Go get some cream, go to the Walgreens, go get something over the counter. And that's how we've been addressing. So that's what we've been conditioned to do, is to address signs and symptoms with something over the counter, something topical, or even maybe a prescription drug. But what really is the cause? of the acne? Well, if you don't address the acne in the beginning at the root cause, then what happens is the root cause progresses and gets worse. And now you're dealing with something like psoriasis, uh, asthma. So now you're moving into the intermediate symptoms of toxicity buildup in the body. So now intermediate symptoms just means that you never addressed it properly the first time. You only treated the symptoms. But if you just treat the symptoms, now once again, it progresses until it becomes advanced. Now you're looking at cancer. Now you're looking at leukemia. Now you're looking at Lou Gehrig's disease. Now you're looking at MS. So MS is really no different than acne. It's just a matter of time. So if we can address the issue before it progresses to the point where it's advanced, then we can prevent the crisis that we're experiencing on a regular basis. And we can put the body back in balance, not only put it back in balance, but maintain balance pretty much throughout our life. And so that's why I came up with the idea of from crisis care to holistic health care, because it's about shifting your whole paradigm. And the example I hate to give you today is that just yesterday, I had wellness coaches in New York. Well, not in New York, wellness coaches in Chicago that was supposed to do a bioscan, which we'll talk about in a second. They were supposed to do a scan on a friend's mother who was diagnosed with colon cancer. And so they called me, and I didn't know about this until maybe a few days ago. So I got on the phone, I talked to the son, and we came up with a plan because the doctors, let her go home because, she was in her 70s. So it wasn't much that they can do. So sometimes they tend to let them leave the hospital in hospice, which means they pretty much just washed their hands to it. And so she got home. We came up with a plan. The coach was going to go over there yesterday evening in order to do the scan at about 6 o'clock. And then once she did the bioscan, I was going to use the data and I was going to customize a regimen to assist her or assist her body in healing itself. Well, by the time 4 o'clock came, she had to be rushed to the hospital. And then an hour later, she died. Wow. So we never got a chance to implement a holistic process that would have saved her life. And what that means is that we waited too late. It was too late. Just like with the heat wave, we were responding too late. With our health, we're addressing it too late. And so, but this is a habit. We have a society habit of procrastinating and waiting until the condition gets worse. And the problem is this: we don't know it's progressing because we're enjoying life, we're having fun, we're eating, we're breathing, we're not having any problems. But meanwhile, disease is progressing in our body day in and day out, year in and year out. And that's why nothing ever happens suddenly. We think that it's sudden because all of a sudden now it shows up, the person just had a stroke, the person just had a heart attack. It was sudden. I was just talking to him yesterday, and today he had a stroke. When something that's sudden happens, what that means is that the body has reached a limit of compensating for energy depletion, high acidity, and oxygen deficiency. Once it reaches that point where it stops compensating, then it throws you into what's called a purification process. So in other words, your body will detox you when it has reached the limit of compensating for all of the waste and poisons that you're taking in and day out. But the problem is this: who can endure for the time that it takes for your body to purify itself? That may not be weeks. That may not be months. That may take a while, because how many years did it take for you to build up that toxicity? You get it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I do have a follow-up to that, not to cut you off, but I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Vibe, when you're finished. Go ahead, doctor.
Okay. Loving this information. I want to know who influenced you to go down this journey.
That's a good question. Well, I'm gonna tell you that the original influence was back in, I'm gonna tell my age now, 1979. 1979, I was 10 years young. And unfortunately, I lived in the Cabrini Green housing projects. We lived in that lack, limitation mentality and scarcity. So, but I didn't know I was a child. And it was on Thanksgiving. I was watching my grandmother, because we were staying with my grandmother at the time. I was watching my grandmother prepare a turkey dinner, as usual. That's what we do in tradition. Well, I noticed, and I can remember as clear as day as if it happened yesterday. I remember her clenching her chest. I didn't know what that meant. All I knew is that something was not right with my granny. And I asked her, was everything okay? She was like, yeah, everything's okay. So she prepared this wonderful big meal, and we went down to our cousin's house because my grandmother and we all lived on the 15th floor in the projects, and so we went down to the 5th floor to my aunt's house where the rest of my cousins were. So when we went down there, my mom came to pick me up. We left to go back to the south side because my mom lived on the south side, so she would pick us up on the weekends so we can spend time with her. Hmm. And so by the time we got to the south side, after leaving my grandmother and my cousins, we were already getting that call that my grandmother had a heart attack. And so she passed on Thanksgiving of 1979. And that was the last time I saw her when she was preparing that meal. And so the problem was is that I was wondering, why did she pass? How long did it take the emergency medical professionals to get there? How much time was she without oxygen? What was really going on? And so I realized at that point that in order for me to be at a position where I can save any one of my family or friends, I wanted to know what to do in a state of emergency at any point in time when it happened, because nobody knows when an emergency is going to show up. But if I'm prepared, it doesn't matter when it shows up, because wherever I am, if I'm prepared for that emergency, I'm going to give that person enough time to live. And that's what really started me off on that journey, her passing.
Well, thank you for that story, and our condolences on her passing, but I'm glad that the test has become a testimony for you.
Absolutely.
And so,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're the guest.
Go ahead.
No, please.
Is your show.
This is very
your show.
We're just the ship. You're driving it.
So from that point, once I started learning about holistic health, my journey, and this is important because people need to know what happened to me that brought me to this particular place. I had an outer body experience in 2002. I had an experience where my consciousness was separated from my physical body.
Wow.
And in that moment, what I realized is that we are not our bodies. Now, we may have heard that before, but until you have the experience, you can't really grasp it. But I grasped it in that moment, because this moment only lasted about maybe 45 seconds. But I was out of my body. It wasn't a near-death experience. I wasn't doing anything but sitting down, and it felt like a beam of light hit me right in my forehead. I later found out that this is the area of what they call the third eye. The third eye represents the sixth energy center in the human body that aligns your midsection. And literally, they call it a third eye because there's a sensor that goes all the way back and attaches to the end of your retina. So it is like an eye. It's not like the physical eyes, but it's a sensory eye. And the sensory eye connects to what's called the pineal gland or the pineal gland. This gland in a lot of our people is calcified due to our diet and lifestyle, which means we don't have access into a sixth dimension or a sixth sense. That's why they said that sixth sense. We got five senses, but that sixth sense is when that pineal gland is activated. When that third eye is open, you now can see into another dimension. You can see beyond this three-dimensional world. And so when I had that experience, my consciousness separated, I peered into eternity in that moment for 45 seconds. And what I saw is what scared the hell out of me. I saw eternity, but what I saw is that death does not end life. We're going to live forever, but it just depends on which side we're going to live. Now, I read that in scripture, but I didn't understand it until I can't say I saw it with my own eyes, because my eyes were somewhere in my body and I was separated from my body. So I saw the vision. And the best explanation I can give you is in scripture, there was a guy by the name of Saul who was a persecutor of Christians. And on the road to Damascus, he had this visitation. And he went from Saul to who we now know as Paul,
Oh,
who was one of the main writers of the New Testament. But he was not Paul before he had that experience. It was that experience that changed the trajectory of his whole life and set him on a course now to save people instead of persecute people. Now, don't get me wrong, I was not a persecutor of people. I thought I was living a great life. I was starting to become a daytime icon. I was on a lot of talk shows. So I was moving up that ladder. I don't know where it was taking me, but apparently it may not have been taking me to a good place, because when I had that out of body experience, everything changed. So finally, when I was back in my body and I was able to feel again, I couldn't stop crying because it was such an overwhelming experience and nobody saw it but me. When it says it comes like a thief in the night, it comes like a thief in the night, which means when it hits you, you don't know it's coming. But when I returned back to my physical body, 2 years later, I found myself in the Holy Land of Israel. Now, whatever happened to me in that experience put me on a path to get to the Holy Land, because in the Holy Land is where I spent 2 weeks with a Black community and nobody ate meat. Nobody ate beef, pork, chicken, turkey, none of that. And this, I'm talking about children, adults, and the elders. Nobody ate meat and they all looked like me. Now, that was a culture shock. But what impressed me the most was the fact that you didn't hear about heart disease, diabetes, you didn't hear about cancer, you didn't hear about you didn't hear about none of the degenerative diseases that we experience in America. And that's when I began to understand the correlation between what we're putting in our bodies and the diseases that we're actually manifesting that runs in our bloodline. And so I left the meat eater and I came back a vegan, and that was 2004. So as of next year, it will be 20 years that I have not touched any meat.
Wow.
Or consumed any meat.
Wow.
And
wow.
And that's what started. That was the next stage of this whole process. The outer body was first, and then the trip to Israel was second. And that's where I got my instructions, because I could not have imagined a vision like that without first having seen it with my own eyes. And since then, that's the image, and when God impregnated me with that vision, it was to bring it back here to the country and start helping our people to have that same experience. And as of today, we're reaching thousands upon thousands of people that are transforming, and even attracting the Dr. Boyce Watkins All Black National Convention into my life was a part of that process of reaching out to our people, and then also going to other different events, other circles. So now I'm speaking in a lot of different circles in order to bring all these circles together so that we can start to understand what I saw in that community, which was health on a whole nother level for our people and for our Black communities.
Oh,
wow.
That's quite a story.
So,
Dr. Tachi, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm enamored. I have to hold myself back so I don't get so drawn in and forget that I'm here for a purpose to help lead this conversation. But this is phenomenal information and a phenomenal journey. So you did it, right? And I know everybody is not the same, but why is it so hard for people to make that paradigm shift? Why is it so hard for people to either become vegan or accept naturopathy or naturopathic medicine? What's the block?
That's a great question. You guys got these questions written down because these are great questions. And these are questions that people need to know about, because you're absolutely right. There is a block, and the block is on the subconscious level. And that's what makes it so powerful, but it also makes it so difficult, because you have one mind, but you have two aspects of one mind. You have the conscious aspect and the subconscious aspect. Well, here's the problem, you guys. The conscious mind can only process 40 bits of information per second. That may seem like a lot per second, because that's a lot. A second goes like this. But the subconscious mind processes 40 million bits of information per second. So that subconscious mind, that subconscious processor, is 1,000,000 times more powerful than your conscious mind. You have to understand how powerful this is, because from the time you were born until the age of 7, you was in what's called theta wave download state, brainwave download state. That means that your brain waves was on theta. Theta is akin to meditation. See, kids from ages 0 to 7 cannot go past that theta wave meditative brain state until they surpass that age, which means most of their childhood, they're downloading information from all around them. They're downloading the personalities, the habits, the bad habits, the good habits of the people around them, from their cousins, from their sisters, from their brothers, from their parents, from what they see on TV, all of that. So we're literally the product of our upbringing without our permission. So that means that wherever you were born into, you become a product of that until you're able to pull yourself out of that ditch. It's almost as if we're born into hell so that we can rise up out of it. Because if I was born into the state I was, in order for me to get here, I had to become conscious of where I was and where I was born into. And I had to use certain deliberate practices in order to get me out of that. And one of them was understanding the power of your subconscious mind. And this is a book that I think everyone and all my wellness coaches are have to read this book. It's mandatory, because if you don't know the power of your own mind, then there's a good chance that you may be using it against yourself. That's why the scripture says that death and life is in the power of the tongue. But it also says that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Well, let's further explain that, because sometimes people don't understand what that means. Remember, I said you have one mind, but you have two aspects of one mind. That means that you have the conscious and the subconscious mind. Well, your conscious mind does not control your heart. Your subconscious mind does. That means that if you had to wake up and start your heart consciously, you probably would forget. So therefore, your subconscious mind is taking on millions of processes in one moment every second. So much so it's unfathomable for even the conscious mind to even be able to process these type of thoughts. So now let's go back to the scripture. If your subconscious mind controls your heart, then let's reword that scripture. As a man thinketh in his subconscious mind, then so is he. If bad living, bad lifestyle, and bad eating was programmed into your DNA when you were young without your permission, then you are hardwired by a certain age to live a life that is not conducive for long life, but only conducive for death. So when it comes down to first understanding that you're on a path towards death, then you have to figure out, well, how do I reprogram my subconscious mind for life? So I went from a lack, limitation, and scarcity mentality to becoming aware that I had a lack, limitation, and scarcity mentality. And I began to deliberately and intentionally reprogram my subconscious mind for success, prosperity, abundance, so that I can begin to have more control over my life, but not just that, also over my health. Because our habit of eating meat, and we got to go into this, you guys, because animal protein is killing us. We're killing the animals, and the animals are killing us. It's instant karma. It may not seem like that, because guess what? We were all conditioned to eat it, right? I knew, growing up, I loved my chicken, beef, turkey, pork. I ate everything, even chitlins. I mean, I even learned how to clean chitlins just so I can eat. Some people don't like chitlins, but the point is that I didn't know chitlins was, intestines. I didn't care, because it was a part of my tradition. It was a part of my upbringing. So I figured it was okay, because if my parents ate it, then they wouldn't give me anything that would harm me. But it turns out that their parents gave them something that would harm them, and their parents was giving them something that harmed them. So it just kept being passed down. So I say that because we think that because there are certain conditions in our bloodline that our parents had, such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, we think, based upon the old science, based upon genetic determinism, which is being still taught in the schools right now, we think that we're bound by the diseases in our family at some age. And that is not true. You have the power to rewrite your genetics. You have the power to rewrite your genes. And when you understand how to do that, then instead of you being bound by diabetes, you have the power to upregulate your genes deliberately and intentionally towards good health, longevity, and activate what's called a youthing gene. Youthing gene is just what I'm saying, youth, youth, youth. You talk about our youth, but when we talk about our youth, here's the paradigm we have. When we say youth, the first image that pops in your head are younger kids. Well, that's not the true essence of youth. Youth, you can have youth at the age of 120. You see? So if you only think youth has to do with the fact that you only been on the planet about 10, 16, 20 years, that's not really youth, because what I'm seeing through the bioscans is I'm seeing kids in their 14, 15, and 16 that are showing plaque buildup on their coronary arteries.
Wow.
Young kids that are showing borderline diabetes.
Wow.
Remember, these were diseases that was once age related, right? So that means that you can expect it at 70. So we was okay that grandma had diabetes at the age of 70. We accepted it. Now, let me say, there's really no age you should ever accept disease, because what I know now is that the fact of you even accepting it brings it into awareness, reality, and manifestation.
Absolutely.
So stop accepting at any age, because once you accept it, once you believe it, you're gonna achieve it. It goes both ways. It's not just what you believe on a positive note, but also what you believe on the negative note. You're gonna manifest that just as well. And this is important, because I want to take that into the deeper understanding that our belief system controls our biology.
Yeah.
Our beliefs control our biology. So what you've been taught growing up becomes what? Rooted in your belief system. Your belief system becomes hardwired into your personality, which becomes hardwired into your subconscious mind. So now I had to build up in order to answer your question. You said, why is it so challenging? Because it's a part of our DNA now. And if you want to change your DNA, you have to break the habit of being who you are. That means you have to become someone totally different, because who you are at the level of your DNA is rooted in your personality, which is hardwired into your mind, which is hardwired into your whole experience. So if you don't like the experience you're having physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, or internally, then you have to change who you're being altogether, which means you have to hardwire, you have to go in deliberately now. You have to hack your own subconscious mind, and you have to start putting in the programs that you want, not the programs that were by default given to you. Most people are living by default because they don't know the power they have. So they say life is tough. No, it's tough because your soul wants to be free, but you're bound by your past. And now it's time for you to come out of the egg and start to create your own life. So just because diabetes is in a family, genetically you're predisposed to it. Just like genetically I'm predisposed to heart disease, I'm predisposed to diabetes because my mother was diagnosed with diabetes. But when I decided to detour from tradition, from the lifestyle that my family was eating, I stopped down regulating my genes towards disease, which means I would never express diabetes, I would never express heart disease, I would never express cancer, because I'm now activating and up-regulating my genes towards health, youthing, and longevity. See, it's night and day. But unfortunately, all of us were born into a habit that perpetually down-regulates our genes for disease. Let me say that again. We were all born into a lifestyle and a family where we're habitually down-regulating our genes. There's really not even a point, except maybe in high school, maybe in college, if you're playing a sport where you begin to upregulate your genes. That's why you see a lot of phenomenal athletes, because their activity levels are so high that they're activating longevity genes, sirtuin genes, they're activating stem cells in the body, and they're repairing their bodies faster until they stop the activity, until they stop the athletic sport, until they stop performing as a professional in the NFL or the NBA.
Okay.
And then now they go back to a regular person's lifestyle. And you've seen them, athletes that were superstars, but now they're starting to look like regular people. Yeah. So it was that moment of immortality that they had. Okay. That once that window closes, because what's not happening during that time is that they're not practicing consciously and deliberately the things that they could practice that will forever upregulate their genes towards good health. And I'll give you an example. Quarterback Tom Brady. A lot of people know quarterback Tom Brady, but they're wondering, how is he still playing football in his 40s? That's a different paradigm, because football players don't go into their 40s. They barely last in the upper 30s, let alone into their 40s, and still winning Super Bowls. There's something he's doing deliberately and intentionally that's given him the longevity, the vitality, and the cognition to be able to still perform in his middle age when other football players are far retired. And what they don't talk about is that he has a plant-based diet.
Yeah, there you go.
They don't talk about that. If they did, you know how many people will start making some changes in their lifestyle, maybe not giving up meat altogether, but they'll at least start considering the amount of meat they're taking in on a regular basis and start to wean themselves down so that the body can stop being so stressed trying to break up animal protein.
Right.
And so this takes us into a question that a lot of people want to know. And I want to say this because this is the most important question on this webinar. If I can save a life, it's about really tuning into this information. Well, let me start here. All protein comes from plants. All protein comes from plants. Let me start there. Because if you look at a gorilla, you look at a cow, if you look at a horse, if you look at a giraffe, an elephant, these are powerful creatures that do not consume animals. So the question is, where do they get their protein from? You see, we've been pretty much marketed to throughout our lives, or shall I say our parents got marketed to. And so what our parents did is they took that propaganda and that marketing and they imposed it upon our life. And we start believing that we're supposed to eat meat in order to get our protein. And as parents, we pass that down to our children. Then they pass it down to their children. So that belief is being passed down, but that belief is a lie. It turns out that humans were never designed by God nor nature to consume animal flesh. We were never designed. And let me explain why that's important. Because it's not enough that you feel you want it. I'm not trying to take it away from you. All I'm trying to do is give people the right information so that you can make the better decisions. Because if something shows up that you don't know where it came from, then at least with the right information, you can say, you know what? Now it's starting to make sense. My body is trying to break down and process the fats, the oils, and the proteins of beef, pork, chicken, turkey, lamb, all the good stuff that we get everywhere, anywhere, on any holiday, any picnic, any cookout, all tradition. But it turns out that these animals, because of their high body temperature, you look at the body temperature of any one of them, you're looking at anything from 101 up to 109 body temperature, whereas human beings are 98.6 degrees. We don't even reach 100. The only time we reach 100 is when we are fighting an infection. Mm-hmm. And then what does your temperature go up to? 101, 102?
Right.
We're shocked if our temperature is that high. But we're trying to break down the proteins and the oils and the fats of an animal whose body temperature, oils, proteins, and fats are stable at 101 all the way up to 109. 98.6 degrees will not cut it. You would have to keep the fire on a little bit longer to start breaking down those oils and proteins, which means it's going to stress the heart. It's going to stress the cardiovascular system. It's going to stress the organs unless you're active, which is why when we're younger, you don't see the consequences as much because we're ripping and running. We're playing sports and all that out. And so we don't see the correlation between the aging process in what we're eating until we start slowing down our activities. When you stop working out too much because you got this great job, and so you're working, and you're not exercising as much. You're not doing as much. You're not jumping around like a kid because you're an adult now. So you don't have time for the kid stuff. But you haven't stopped the lifestyle or what you eat or how you eat. You haven't stopped the tradition. In fact, now you're sharing that tradition with your own family if you have a wife and kids. Now you've passed down the same thing, just like in the movie Soul Food, when Big Mama died of that heart attack after making that big old soul food meal. And then after the funeral, everybody went back to the same food that caused Big Mama to have a heart attack. And that's the best analogy because that's exactly what happened in my family. My grandmother had a heart attack, but then we went on back to eating that same food that caused her to have a heart attack, but we didn't know. So we were in the dark about a lot of things that eventually caused us all of the atrocities and tragedies and the crises that we're experiencing today. So when I say that animal protein was never designed, what I'm saying is scientifically, let's take a look at it. If you're 98.6 degrees and you're trying to consume poultry, which goes all the way up to 109, and let me say, if you guys picked up if you Googled right now the body temperature of a chicken or cow or beef, you will understand what I'm saying because this is information that's not been hidden from us, but we have not really correlated it or made the connection between the temperatures of an animal and the fact that our human body temperature is not sufficient to effectively break it down. So therefore it becomes sludge in our system. And that's what's clogging up our arteries. And that's what's clogging up and damaging our kidneys. And because you're seeing the dialysis places popping up. It's because we have been overdosing on animal protein. And not only that, as another proof, when I do the bioscan, on the bioscan, the kidney feature, the kidney report shows elevated levels of uric acid, elevated levels of urea, elevated levels of proteinuria, which is protein in the urine. So I'm seeing it through research. I'm seeing it through actual practical readings on the bioscan that people's kidneys are shutting down over all the years of consuming animals. And so when you think about what's happening in dialysis, these are people who can no longer filter through their kidneys like they used to. So therefore they have to go to a center, plug up to a dialysis machine, and their blood has to flow from their body all the way into the machine, be cleaned, and flow right back into their body because their kidneys aren't doing the work. If you do that long enough, guess what? Now you will shut down the ability of the kidneys to filter the toxic waste out.
Wow.
So this is why it's so important, because I see where it's taken us. It's taken us to a point where now our children are on dialysis. Now our children are on medications. Our children are having ectomies, hysterectomy for the young girls, prostectomy for the young boys. And we're reaching a society of infertility where the human species at some point will become fully extinct if we don't do something about this now.
Wow.
Before you go, Dr. Vibe,
sure.
Let me just take a break too. If anybody came in late, welcome. This is a fantastic conversation that we're having with Dr. Eric Prince, myself, Dr. Tachi, and Dr. Vibe are honored to have the opportunity to interview him. Thank you, Dr. Boyce, or to have the conversation with him. And there was something in the chat. Dorothy Milton asks, what is the temperature for fish? What is their temperature?
You know what? That's a great question. And that leads into, and it's funny because you guys are really flowing into what needs to happen. It's like the Holy Spirit is moving the right information into your ears, because if you notice, I didn't mention fish. And the reason I didn't mention fish is because the body temperature of fish is lower than humans.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Which is why fish oils are in a health food store, not chicken oil. Chicken oil is in a grocery store. Fish oil is in a health food store. What that means is that a fish, based upon the temperature of the water that it's in, it can be either 40 degrees or 60 degrees, but it doesn't matter if it's 40 or 60, it's below 98.6 degrees. What that means is that you can consume fish as a protein and you can break down their oils and you can break down their they're protein, which means you can process it, you can assimilate it, you can absorb it, and you can eliminate it effectively. So for my mother, who's now 81 years of age, she let go of all the terrestrial animals and she became a pescatarian. So a pescatarian is a vegetarian that eats fish. That was a good compromise. I was grateful that she did that, because when she did that, it allowed her to surpass the lowest age in our family at which a person has passed, or shall I say the highest age.
Mm-hmm.
So she surpassed 79. Now, in some families, 90, 99 may be the highest that a person has lived. But in my family, it was 70, it was 79. So when she turned 80, now 81, she broke the bloodline curse when she let go of those terrestrial animals. So if she had not let go of those animals, which means she let go of tradition, the same tradition that she taught me, that her mother taught her, but she was willing to make the changes. And so I tell people, your success in life is in direct proportion to what you're willing to sacrifice. If you're not willing to make any sacrifices, even knowing the truth, then now there's nothing we can do for you. Because I act as, Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel talks about the watchman. The watchman is someone who knows of impending danger, and he must warn the people. And if he warns the people and they pay heed, everyone is saved. If he warns the people and they don't pay heed, then their blood is on their hands. But if I don't warn the people and they don't pay heed, then their blood is on my hands. That's how it's set up. So it's more mandatory for me to share this information, because God is doing something on the planet right now. And it has to do with pulling you away from all of his precious species. And I've been watching on Instagram the relationship and the interaction between all different species that I've never seen before, between birds and dogs, between cats and fish, and the love that they share for each other. They have a genuine love for each other. And then when of course we consume them, as we have been programmed and conditioned to, we have been doing it without any empathy. Because when it came down to what our parents fed us, we didn't see them kill the chicken unless you lived on a farm and you saw them wring the neck. But if you did, you probably wouldn't even want the chicken anymore. All we saw was the finished product. We ate it, it tastes good, and that's just how it started rolling. Well, my son, his name is Aviel Zion Prince. He's 10 years of age, about the same age I was when my grandmother passed and everything changed. Aviel Zion Prince has never eaten animals in his life, never gave him chicken, fish. I raised him vegan from birth. And guess what? He doesn't miss any. He doesn't miss anything. He doesn't care about meat. He doesn't have a curiosity. When you train a child in a way he should go, he shall not depart. But you know what happened? We were trained in a way that we shouldn't go. And that's why we're having the problems departing, because it's rooted in our subconscious practice.
Whoa.
Wow.
On the Dr. Vibe Show, this man dropping some knowledge bombs. I'm telling you. I'm just going to catch up. There's been some comments that people have had here.
Yes.
Conscious, competent. Elhaj Harris. Also, Natasha says that's powerful. And they got some hearts going on here. Natasha saying, wow, talking about Tom Brady, your information you shared about him. She did not know about that. Also, Natasha says, I had a friend pass away earlier this year at the age of 47 who was on dialysis. And people saying they're loving this. Natasha says, and Rashad Marsh says, this is like Scared Straight episode, LOL. I'm going to the gym right now. But and disclosure, Dr. Prince, I've gone about 75% plant-based in the last few months. So I noticed a difference, because I saw a holistic practice person. They said one of the major concerns she had with me is inflammation.
Got it.
So I'm not going to make my story, because we've got questions coming in now. So I guess Dr. Tasha will tag team, but I'm going to say first question from Eunice Hall. And Eunice is asking, what is the temperature of fruit and vegetables?
Well, fruits and vegetables, of course, are not even close to these because remember, we were brought up on a raw diet. If you go back to the first chapter in Genesis, verses 28, 29, 30, it tells us of our original diet. It says, the fruit yielding seed to you, it shall be for meat. And then it went to the next paragraph and it said, to the beast of the field, I give you every green herb, and to you it shall be for meat as well. So even in the beginning of the scriptures, man was not a vegetarian. Man was a fruitarian, which means that the fruit, the raw fruit that came from the trees, which was uncooked, it was still live with enzymes, with vitamins, with minerals that was rich to the body. It had a vitality, it had an energy that was able to assimilate into our body's energy and to maintain our energy and frequency at a higher place, or shall I say a higher pH. What's important is that when you cook a food past 106, you kill and destroy the vitamin and mineral value of that food. When you eat it raw, when you eat it uncooked, then now it's able to assimilate into your body energetically, nutritionally, and it's able to feed you what you need in order to sustain what they call centropy in your body. Centropy versus entropy. Entropy follows the second law of thermodynamics, which says that as matter starts to decline and break down, it goes back to basic molecular structures. That's entropy. That's the body breaking down. That follows the course or the scripture that says, unto dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. That's entropy. But centropy is different. Centropy is the perpetual upbringing and rising and ascension of your body into a more spiritual state. The difference is entropy follows the path of acidity, whereas centropy follows the path of alkalinity. The alkaline scale is from 0 to 14. 7 is neutral. Anything above 7 is alkaline. Anything below 7 is acidic. The difference is that the more alkaline your body is, the more oxygen rich your fluid is and your blood is. The more acidic your body is, the more oxygen deprived your body is. So this follows the same explanation when it comes to meat. Meat is an acidic substance because when meat breaks down, it turns into urea. Urea turns into uric acid. And so therefore, every time all through our childhood, we were eating a lot of meat. I know I was. And our bodies were constantly fighting to try to maintain that pH balance of alkalinity. Well, it fights through the bicarbonate system. It fights through the respiratory system. And guess what? It fights through the renal system. Those are your three defenses to acidity in the body. But if what you're seeing is these dialysis places that are popping up, that means that our bicarbonate system is malfunctioning. Our respiratory system, if you're not working out, it's not being as effective. And if our renal system, due to the excessive protein, is breaking down, then we're like a dead battery that's going to be thrown away when there's no more alkalinity. Your body is just like a battery. You have a plus charge and a minus, just like a battery. So when you're born into this world, you're born as an alkaline sentient being. Actually, you live in an alkaline amniotic fluid for 9 months. So when you come out, you're a pure Duracell rechargeable battery until your parents start imposing all of the lifestyle, the diet, the traditions on you. Then you begin to become a dying battery over time. And what we have claimed as the aging process is nothing more than the degeneration process that can be reversed. It's the degeneration process that can be stopped. Well, once I learned you can slow down the aging process by changing some things in your diet, then I learned you can stop the aging process. But who wants to stop at the age of 70? I learned thereafter you can reverse the aging process. And that's where I put the rest of my work and my career in, not only changing and reversing my age, but helping others to reverse their biological age. And what I mean by that is you have You have a chronological age, right? That's the time you entered the world when you were born on whatever day and whatever month. That's your birth date, right? And every 365 days, what happens? You have a birthday. How many times have you told yourself you're a year older? Every time you tell yourself that, let's go back to the subconscious mind. Who's listening to you? So every time you say, I'm a year older, I'm a year older, I'm a year older, remember, death and life is in the power of the tongue. So if you keep speaking that you're getting older and your subconscious mind is listening, then your body has to reflect what you believe. It's one of the reasons why we age the way we do, because we believe
I refuse. So I refuse. I rebuke
or American
getting older.
We're going to recuse and refuse, right?
And rebuke, yes.
and you have to, because we didn't realize that we are the cause of our aging process. We earned everything that we experience. Every condition that we're experiencing does not happen by accident. It's just that there's an underlying working dynamic and operation that's happening that we're not aware of. But once we become aware of it and we begin to gain control of it, then we now can begin to reverse our biological age. And let me explain how important this is and what that means. You have two ages. You have a chronological age and you have a biological age. Chronologically, I'm 54 years of age. And I say 54 years young. I don't use the word old anymore. I said 54 years young. So in other words, I've taken 54 trips around the sun. Biologically, I'm anywhere 23 to 25 years. 23 to 25 biologically. They said, well, how do you know that, Dr. Prince? Well, come January, I'm competing on the college circuit in the 400 meters and the 200 meters. So I still run collegiate track and field. See, this is something that people probably didn't know about me yet. So I'm not just talking about this stuff. I'm on record, on video, on camera, running and competing at the college level, Division 1, 2, or 3 at any particular weekend. My old school, University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which is a Big Ten Division 1 school, I'm competing back at that school, which I started that back 10 years ago. So back when I was 41, my competitors were 20 years chronologically younger than me, 20 years chronologically younger. Now they're 30 years chronologically younger than me, but I haven't aged since then, because I stopped aging. When you stop aging, it doesn't matter how many times the earth circles the sun. It doesn't matter, because you're no longer disconnected to that. And in fact, you no longer believe that, because guess what? It was never true that you age because you get a birthday every year. That was a lie. There is no correlation between your birthday and the aging process. But because you believe it, you're going to age because your body believes in you. But if you don't believe in the truth, if you don't know the truth, then you're going to keep feeding your body a lie, and it's going to live by the lie. And the day that you eat of that tree, ye shall surely die. It was the fruit of lies. Right. We've been eating the fruit of lies. And in the day we eat that fruit, we're dying because of it. So God said, of all the trees in the garden, you may freely eat. And he said, if you eat of that tree, like Jesus said, if you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you shall have eternal life. Where if someone is speaking the truth and you're consuming their words, and their words are resonating with you, and their words are raising your frequency, raising your vibrations, and elevate, you're breathing life into a person. You're inspiring them. Inspire means to be in spirit. So you're breathing life into them. You're giving the spirit for the sake of centropy instead of entropy. The lie activates entropy instead of centropy. So we start deteriorating based upon the lie, but we start regenerating based upon the truth. So what I became a tree of life. And I began to tell people the truth, even if my life depended on it. Because 2 of my predecessors died or were murdered before the pandemic. I couldn't let that stop me. I couldn't say, man, I don't want to go out like that. I'm just going to keep quiet. No. I said, well, if I die or if I'm assassinated because of what I'm saying, what I'm trying to do for my people, then that's a good death. You see, you have to become fearless. You have to be willing to die for what you believe in order to bring life, because even scripture says, he who tries to save his life loses it. But he who loses his life for my sake, the same shall save it. And when I knew I was protected, when I knew I was covered, I was ready to step out and expose the lies that's killing our people. And by doing that, people are surviving. People are living today. People are reversing heart disease. Women are shrinking fibroids naturally without medication, without surgery. They're shrinking them. Diabetes is being reversed without insulin, without metformin. Strokes are being avoided because we see it coming on a bioscan. Heart attacks are being avoided because we see it coming on a bioscan. So we're preventing disease. I'm taking you out of the status of being a patient. Now you're being more proactive with your health, because now you're deliberately in charge of your health. Now the responsibility is back in your hands. We gave up responsibility of our life to somebody outside of us called a medical doctor. And a lot of times he didn't look like us. He was a white doctor in a white lab coat in a white hospital in a white room. And we trusted our health to all of that whiteness. And look where it's gotten us. Medical error
Absolutely.
and medical treatment is the third leading cause of death in America.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Wow, this is fascinating. And I know that there are lots of people that have questions and comments, and we are live on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, we're live on YouTube right now. I want to say hello, or we want to say hello to everybody on YouTube. Adrian Scurry said that they started about 4 months ago. I don't eat meat every day. I go vegetarian a few times a week, which is, what you're talking about, starting somewhere, baby steps, definitely. And Renee Muhammad says, I believe our belief system controls your DNA. It's such a pleasure to hear you speak. Yes. Deborah Kingston says, it's custom made perfect, but I am thankful that I am meat free. So thank you for that, definitely. And there are a lot more, so we could get to those later, but we do have a question here in Zoom, and let's see if I can get to it. Someone was asking, the water. Here it is. I found it. So someone asked if this, Rashad Marsh asked, will this diet cure seizures?
That's a good question. In fact, the cleansing and detoxification process will begin to address the root cause of some seizures, because you have different causes of seizures, but a lot of it is neurological. And so here's the thing with seizures: when you're dealing with something neurological, you're dealing with a transmission issue. There are things that happens in our childhood that are traumatic. Now, you may have seizures that you may have been born with epilepsy gene, and then now you're having seizures because you're born with that gene, or there can be could have been an injury that may have caused that, or it could have been some trauma in your life that started to interfere with that transmission and brings you into that seizure state. Well, no matter what it is, it has to do with the transmission when it pertains to your nervous system. That nervous system is a communication system in the body. And if there's any type of blockage or impedance on that nervous system transmission, it's going to affect the organ. And yes, it could throw the body into a grand mal seizure. So when it comes to accessing life force energy, you know how when people go to do acupuncture, where they put one needle here and one needle there based upon your meridians. Well, what they're doing is when they insert a needle and then another needle, what they're doing is they're clearing the energy blockage between those two needles so that the pain can go away. Because the pain represents inflammation. It represents the fact that that tissue, that organ is not getting proper transmission. And so therefore it could be degenerating, or it can be inflamed, or it could have some pain. But when they do the acupressure, it clears out the blockage between that on that neurological nerve meridian, and it restores communication to the tissue. We don't just have blockage in our vascular system, which leads to heart attacks, strokes. We also have blockage on our nervous system based upon how we're living and how we are responding to stress. It's not always what you're eating that makes you sick. Sometimes it's what's eating at you. And you may have some suppressed or repressed things that may have went on in your family, or you may have some repression that may have happened while you was in your mother's womb. Because remember, they have run tests to show how the fetus responds to what's going on outside and what's going on with the mother. So from the time that the fetus is growing, it's now downloading trauma, or it's downloading drama, or it's downloading joyful events. That's why it's so important as a mother carrying, you must protect a child, not only physically, but you must protect their mind. My daughter's mom would sing to the child. My daughter's mom would read to the child, because they know that child's consciousness is alive and present. But if there's a situation where the child was unwanted and then there's conflict between the mother and the father, that's going to create blockage on that child's meridian, because that child is absorbing all of that trauma. So when they come out, it's as if they've been stressed for 9 months. And then they come out and now they're dealing with this neurological deficit, which could lead to epilepsy, which could lead to now taking medication, which can lead to more degeneration. You see what I'm going with that? So it definitely can help out a lot, because our goal when you're cleansing is not just to address the physical toxins, but also the mental and emotional toxins, because those have to come up and out as well in order for you to have perfect balance once again. Okay.
So Dr. Pierre, we got a lot of questions. So I'm going to do a little bit of rapid fire here for you, because we got a few questions, especially from the Zoom participants. So I'm going to ask you we're going to do a little bit of rapid fire with some questions. Is that fair with you?
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Okay. First question from Terry Alliston Wilson. I think Terry wants to ask, what should you start eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you want to stop eating meat? So what are recommended food intakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
I would say if you want to just start now, I would say start looking at certain plant-based protein products. So plant-based protein products. One of the people that I use is called Gardein. Gardein, spelled Gardein. Gardein is a good plant-based product company. So let's say if I want vegan bacon, then I get it from Gardein. It's protein, but it's plant-based. It may look like bacon. I can still have it with a vegan sausage, or I can still do my eggs, which would be vegan eggs. So basically you just veganize everything. It's still going to look like the food that you've always eaten. And that's the key, is that we've never really dealt with an actual animal until, of course, Thanksgiving, when we had to see the turkey or maybe the chicken, but we're seeing parts of the chicken, but we don't really see a whole animal until Thanksgiving. That's when we realize we're eating an animal. But all of the stuff that we've been eating throughout our life can be veganized and made plant-based. So start now switching off things, investigate different foods. It's easier now in this country to be vegan than it used to be just 10 years ago. So there are more options, more restaurants are popping up, and there's a lot of wonderful vegan restaurants that are popping up that will feed you food and you will not believe that it's meat. In fact, there's a restaurant called I Can't Believe It's Not Meat. That's the name of the restaurant. I can't believe it's not meat.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was at a vegan restaurant last week, and I had vegan cheesecake.
How was it?
It was out of bounds.
Couldn't tell the difference, right?
Wow.
Like
out of bounds. It was really good. Let's go to another question here. Natasha asks, shouldn't we be concerned about mercury in fish?
Yes, absolutely yes. But it's about, at every level, there's another devil. I'm not saying you're stopping at pescatarianism. What I'm saying is that in order to begin to give your body some relief from all the heavier proteins you've been eating, as you wean off them and you begin to make fish an alternative, You're still getting your protein. You're still going to get some level of toxicity, but look at how much you just offloaded. Now you've given your body a break. If it was dealing with the beef, pork, chicken, and turkey, and you remove that out and you just do fish, then guess what? You've just alleviated a lot of burden and stress in your body. You've just freed up some energy that was being conserved. I mean, that was being expended on a regular basis. Now that energy is going to boost your purification system. And yeah, if you take in a little mercury here and there, but guess what? You're getting rid of it just as fast as you're taking it in. So you see, there is a spinoff. But yes, at some point, your body's going to say, now it's time to go to the next level. It's time now for you to let go of the fish and become maybe vegetarian. Then your body's going to say, well, now it's time to let go of the dairy and the cheese and become vegan. Then now at some point, your body's going to say, it's time to let go of all of the cooked vegan food and maybe become 50% raw and 75% raw. You see? And then that's how you keep on evolving your diet.
Okay,
Absolutely.
next. Go ahead.
Could I get something in from from here? So I just want to bring up the fact that I'm Nigerian, so jollof rice is a staple thing. But what I've started to do is not make jollof rice so white ricey. So I learned how to make jollof rice with like brown rice and not put chicken and things in it. And it's equally as delicious without it. So there are ways, as you've been saying, to actually substitute and still have the same great food experience. So someone asked this or said this, and I kind of want to bring this up. Somebody was talking about men's diets and women's diets being different, and something that they read in a book by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I want to bring this up. Should we be eating differently based on gender? And I'm going to add in also something I was going to ask you. Should we eat the way our ancestors ate? And I'm asking that because people tend to say, oh, the Mediterranean diet is the best diet. Oh, you should eat like this. But if you're not of a Mediterranean background, that's not the way you ate anyway. So there's a convoluted question. Should we eat the way our ancestors ate? And should we eat differently based on our gender?
Got you. Well, when it comes to gender, there are certain natural herbs that are best for women as opposed for men. But we're more diverse based upon our blood type. We're more diverse based upon our blood type, which means that your blood type, the antigen on your red blood cell that determines your blood type, also acts as a security system. And that security system will identify the different foods that you eat as an enemy or a friend, as an enemy or a friend. So if you're a male or female in your blood type A, then you're going to have a similar diet, not because you're male or female, but because you have similar chemistry. See, it's all about the chemistry, not as much as the gender. There are certain things that are specific for women, certain things that are specific for men. So like men, when you're dealing with prostate, one of the best herbs is saw palmetto. But with women, one of the best herbs is, kelp bladderwrack. So there are certain ones, but when it comes to your blood type, you got to understand, you're talking about 16 food groups, from even meats to fish, to fruits, to vegetables, to breads, to beans. Out of all of those different groups, there's something in every group for each blood type that you should be avoiding, because your body will identify it as an enemy. And when it does that, guess what happens? It triggers your immune system to go into action. And if you're eating in the dark and you don't know which foods are being identified as an enemy, then that means that you may be triggering your immune system day in and day out, day after day, week after week, month after month. If you do that with anything, wouldn't you run it down? That's what happened in 2020. So many people that didn't know their blood type and have been eating in the dark for years was now primed for the best infectious experience during the pandemic, which is how it was probably planned.
And I think
because
there's
that's why they
actually a
stop.
book about that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Eat Right for Your Blood Type.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna find that book, but I want you to know my campaign is plant-based for your blood type, because
Okay. Okay.
even the book will say that blood type O is compatible for eating meat, but that's not true, because no human being is compatible. It just means that if you're blood type O in a marriage and a spouse is blood type A and you're both eating meat, O is going to live longer, A is going to die sooner. That's all that really means, because blood type A is more conducive for an agrarian lifestyle. Blood type A thrives on a vegetarian diet. That means that over time, when everyone migrated from O to an agrarian lifestyle, they lost the adaptation for consuming animal protein, which means now they're more into fruits and vegetables. So a person who's blood type A that's eating more meat and they lost the gene for that adaptation, then the more meat they eat is going to cause a greater degeneration in their body.
Okay. Let me catch
Thank
up
you.
with another conversation, and we want to make sure we get them in as quickly as we can. Eunice says the gorilla eats only fruits and is very strong with muscles. Should we people juice our fruit and eat our vegetables?
Well, that's a matter of preference. I juice my fruits and my vegetables. I also eat my fruits and vegetables. It doesn't matter either or, but it depends on your agenda. Like as of today, I fast anywhere from 18 to 22 hours a day. And I do eat once a day. I fast from 18 to 22 hours. There's only 24 hours in a day. That means that I'm spending the majority of my day not eating. What that means is that I'm taking in less toxins, and I'm allowing my body to activate longevity genes, stem cells, and it's actually repairing my body, processing the food, breaking it down, using it as energy, and there's very little byproduct. In other words, I'm not wasting anything because I'm giving my body enough time to process everything, break it down, assimilate it, and eliminate what's not necessary.
Okay.
So it's a matter of how you structure your lifestyle and how you structure your diet.
Okay. Got another question here. Anonymous attendee says, are eggs allowed on an alkaline diet? And what are your major protein sources? The person here says they don't eat nut products.
Okay. Yeah, you don't always have to get your protein from nuts. And what was the first part of that?
Yes. Are eggs allowed on an alkaline?
Eggs. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on if you're vegetarian. If you're vegetarian, then you're an egg eater. You're a dairy eater. You're a dairy cheese eater. You're a milk drinker. That's what it means to be a vegetarian. That means that you haven't let go of the dairy products yet. As a vegan, I don't do any eggs on a cleanse or off a cleanse. I don't do any milk, any dairy, none of that, any dairy cheese, because one, unfortunately, milk does not do your body good. Most people don't realize that milk consumption causes you to leach calcium. Milk consumption causes you to leach calcium and develop osteoporosis. Well, weren't we taught that milk does your body good and you're getting your calcium from milk, when all in actuality is causing us to lose calcium. And so that's what I mean by propaganda and marketing, is that, and I know this from scanning hundreds of people who drink milk all the time, and now on the scan is showing them with a decrease in their bone density and an increase of osteoporosis.
Wow.
So now there's a lot we've been lied to that's causing us to have a very tragic health experience.
I have another comment here. I have problems. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Chachi.
Well, I was just going, because I know that you are looking in the question box, and there was a question in the chat from Dorothy Milton. I don't think we answered. How important is drinking water to our new diet, and should we drink more alkaline water?
Good question. Well, believe it or not, water is essential because you're majority water. You're anywhere from 60 to 70% water. Cells need water. Protein processes need water. Protein synthesis need water. Everything in the body requires water. Your brain is majority water. So if you're finding yourself dehydrated, you're going to have some issues mentally in your brain. And this even goes back to even seizures, because your body needs water and your brain needs rich nutrition on a regular basis. So if you're eating a lot of food that's nutrient poor, then you're not feeding your brain what it needs and also the water that it needs in order to be able to perform properly. Then that's when you start seeing signs and symptoms showing up. But the signs are not to be treated with drugs and medication. The signs is to indicate that there's something you need to do different in order to restore your balance. And so that's the holistic way. The allopathic medical way is, well, if you have a symptom of something, let's just treat it and let's just knock it out. Well, if you knock out the symptom of something and the disease progresses like we talked about before, then that means at some point you're just repressing the actual underlying root cause so that it can get worse. And that's what we're experiencing on a general. We're taught to do that. So we're taught to treat our system and our bodies in the least effective way, expecting good results.
Okay. Another comment here. This person says, I have problems with GERD. I am a normal weight and eat a bland diet. I was told to minimize gluten. Can you provide general tips to control or cure GERD?
Well, one, you're going to have to definitely probably stop eating animal protein if you are. Also, you need to understand that there are laws to combining your food. There are food combining laws based upon the rate of digestion and absorption and assimilation into your body. Believe it or not, proteins and carbs do not combine well. That's a poor combination, but we were taught to put our protein and our carbs together. So once again, it goes back to how we were raised that's causing the most damage in our body, because if there are rules to combining our food based upon the rate of digestion, and if we don't follow that law, then we're combining food with food that's going to, in a sense, take longer to digest, like protein. And when you eat food on top of that, your body is going to first digest the heavier, dense food, which may take longer. Protein takes 5 hours or more. So now you eat carbs on top of that. The carbs are going to sit for a while and they're going to putrefy, which means it's going to rot in your gut and it's going to cause all type of bloating, acid reflux, gastritis, colitis, diverticulitis, because we're not combining our foods properly. And if you want to look for how to do that, go to internet and look up proper food combining chart. Look up the proper food combining chart, and you're gonna discover that you've been eating wrong all this time, and that's what GERDS has been trying to tell you. That's all it's been trying to tell you. You see?
All right.
Absolutely. Can I get in this
absolutely.
one from, I'm going back to the chat over here on Zoom. Fred Shelton says, hello, Dr. Prince. You referenced the bioscan earlier. Can you give us more information about the bioscan and how it works?
There we go, Fred. Fred knows how to keep me on track. So and Fred is right. It is important now at this moment that I talk about the bioscan, because everything that we're discussing could not have been realized if I had not learned and discovered quantum biofeedback resonance technology. The difference between quantum bioscan and the equipment in the hospitals is that our medical system was built on the foundation of Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics is the predictability of large objects and how they move, whereas quantum physics is based upon the behavior of subatomic particles. It's two different physics. So unfortunately, in the medical arena, their equipment is calibrated at trauma levels. So they're looking at billions of cells of abnormality. Whereas when the quantum resonance magnetic analyzer, which we call the bioscan can ascertain the pathology of disease down to 10 cells or more, just 10. Now, we can't even see 10 cells. What that means is that the bioscan can trace the origins of any condition you're experiencing right now back to where it began. In other words, the bioscan identifies the root cause of the condition that a person is experiencing. That means that now we can eradicate it, not just treat it. Because remember, treatment is just clipping off the edges. Eradicating is uprooting it permanently. Through quantum bioscan, we can uproot the condition because we can identify it. So when a person diagnosed with stage 3 cancer sit down with me, the first thing I can show them is what's causing it. When a person is dealing with heart disease, possibly needing a triple bypass, when they sit down with me and we scan them, I can show them what's causing it. If we know what's causing something and we address it at the level of causality, then we can eradicate the conditions, signs and symptoms go away, and a person comes off medication. That's what we do. That's what we've been doing for 10 years, just addressing the root cause. So that's the difference between a naturopathic holistic doctor and a medical doctor. They treat signs and symptoms. We eradicate the root cause, and signs and symptoms go away without medication. They patent medication because that's how they make their money. So they don't care if you're waiting for the crisis, because it's more advantageous for them that you get sick so that they can manage your sickness until you die. Whereas we want to remove the sickness so that you won't die. They say they're on the front line, but unfortunately, they're at the end of the line. My goal as a naturopath is to prevent you from getting to the end of the line. So I'm on the front line. Remember, in emergency medicine, I know what it is to be at the end of the line. So you can't trick me and say, I'm on the front lines. No, that's not the front lines. That's at the end of the line. That means that your life is weighing in the balance. And everything that you've done to that point where you're about to have a heart attack, a stroke, or a cardiac arrest, it has already been done. And if a paramedic come in, a doctor comes in, and he does save you. I've saved some people. I've helped people have some near-death experiences. But then there was a lot more people that just didn't make it. You know, no matter how much CPR I did, know how much sweat that was running down my head, how many times I had to intubate them in the field to get a tube down their throat. I did whatever I could to save that person's life. But then the next day I had to wash it all off. I had to let it go. And that was the hardest thing, because the next day I probably have to be dealing with another life in my hands. I'm going to say this for the medical professionals. One of the reasons they may be so cold is because they see death on a regular basis. And the only way they can keep living and doing what they're doing is to somehow repress it to the point where they see us as just patients. So that's why it's important to understand that, you know, in order to really address your issues, you must understand that the bioscan, once we identify what's going on in your body, I was able to customize a regimen based upon knowing that you have a fatty liver, knowing that you have clogged kidneys, knowing which vitamins and which minerals you were deficient in, knowing that you have plaque buildup on your coronary arteries and you have plaque buildup on your cerebral blood vessels before the stroke, before the heart attack, so we can avoid it altogether. So avoiding a crisis is definitely, you cannot have this topic and discussion without infusing the bioscan technology in there. And let me explain what the bioscan does so you can understand why this technology is so powerful. It comes out of another country. It's not here in Western medicine. And you know, there's a reason why, because that's not their agenda. Their agenda is not to eradicate, because there's no money in eradication. There's only money in treatment. So therefore, when I brought the bioscan on the scene, I introduced it to Fred and Anita's organization and my company, Opulent Health and Wellness, connected with Akana LLC, and we created wellness coaches across the country. I taught them how to read the bioscan, how to use the bioscan, so that wherever you are in the country, if you're in New York, Dallas, Detroit, California, you can go get your scan done, find out what's going on in your body that you would never have known had you not done the scan. That's why at the beginning, what did we talk about? Dr. Boyce did a scan at the last event in Atlanta. I need to talk to him about what was on his scan, because there are things that can be on a scan that can be approaching, that if we don't address it now, you'll hear about a crisis later instead of a crisis being averted. My goal is to avoid crises altogether, because I know what that looks like. because I came from that life, and there's nothing good about that. We already know where that ends. But once you start doing that scan, which is why now every year our coaches are growing at the All Black National Convention, and we have more people that are becoming coaches that are learning the scan, so that, because you have to think about it, we lose 1 million people every year to just heart disease and cancer alone. So we need hundreds of thousands of wellness coaches with this technology in their hand, not just 300 or 400. That's where we're at now. So over the next 10 and 20 years, the more people we train, the more people we coach, the more people that are cleansing with us, becoming part of our national team, we are literally changing the world as you speak right now. We have a revolution going on, and people are starting to get well by avoiding their doctor's advice. They're not doing chemo and radiation. They're not doing surgery. They're saying, you know what, I'm going to take a more holistic approach. Yeah, the doctors are going to try to scare you because that's what they're trained to do. But you have to stand your ground. If you don't stand your ground and say, this is what I want to do because this is my body, and they're going to keep on taking you through the ringer because that's what they're trained to do. So biofeedback technology is designed to measure the electromagnetic frequency when cells divide. It measures the frequency of that cell division, and it's able to let us know where your body is storing waste and toxicity. By knowing where your body is storing waste and toxicity, I'm able to customize a regimen to address those areas, remove the toxins through detoxification, which is the removal of waste, stored waste and toxins out your tissue, your cells, and your muscles. And as you remove that, guess what happens? The body goes back to functioning properly. In fact, biologically, you start to return back to your prime, because every 7 to 10 years, you get a brand new body. Every 7 to 10 years, you get a brand new body. Now, that doesn't look like new shoes, because when we think new, we say, oh man, I got some new shoes. And you look down and they look like old shoes. You'll be like, wait, those aren't new shoes. Well, that's what the body is. It's a new body because it has all new cells. That's a natural process. You can't stop that process until you die. But what's really happening, you guys, is that the toxicity levels is climbing. That's what's happening every 365 days. So what makes us look like we're aging is really the fact that we're just degenerating. We don't grow old, we mold. And we're molding over 365
good
days.
Lord.
Wow. Okay.
Well, we'll just take our moldy selves on somewhere. Wow.
Okay. Let's move on after that one. Okay. Dr. Prince, we got about 4 more conversation pieces, and we're going to call it an evening because everyone has added. So I'm going to ask, Dr. Tachi, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the three quick questions in the Q&A, and if you can handle the one in the Zoom chat, would that work?
Got it.
Okay, yes. So rapid fire questions for you, Dr. Prince. How often should we detox? Lauren asks.
Oh, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you guys asked that, because the detoxification process, when you first start this journey, is going to depend first on you and your goals and your situation. If you're obese and you're dealing with metabolic disorder called diabetes, or if you have high blood pressure, then there's a good chance you should probably initially in that first year be cleansing anywhere from every 3 months to every 4 months. That means either every quarter or triannually. The reason you're doing that is because you want to keep on hitting that fat buildup. You want to keep hitting that waste buildup, because your body stores waste in fat tissue. So the weight gain is nothing but stored waste. So the cleanse, every time you cleanse, you're going to knock off anywhere from 16 to 24 pounds each cleanse, depending on how far you are from your body mass index. So think about it. If you know where you want to be and you know where you are, do the math. If you want to be at a certain weight and you know where you're at now, then you say, okay, well, I only need 3 cleanses this year to get back to my college weight. Then you're going to do 3 cleanses, and bam, once you get back to your college weight, down, you can drop it down to maybe 2 cleanses a year, right? Now you're doing 2 cleanses a year. So I tell people at least 2 a year is great. 1 cleanse a year at least. But sometimes that one is just for a person who's really just trying to maintain what they have, not to get back. If you're trying to get back, you need 2 or 3 and maybe even 4. And what I'll tell you real quick is my son's mom, we're not together right now, but she's married now. But my son's mom, she had a traumatic experience with her first son. That was before I came along. But when we got together and my son was conceived, she was afraid to have another child. But I had taken her quarterly through a cleanse. So every 3 months I was putting on a cleanse. Every 3 months I was putting on a cleanse. So she lost 45 pounds in the course of 18 months. She went from a size 12 down to a size 4. And she was now in a state in her 40s as if she was in her 20s. She conceived my son in her 40s better than she had conceived her first son when she was younger. And because of that, she was able to now go back to having birth. So in other words, it doesn't matter how old you are as a woman. You can be in your 50s and your 60s. Once you biologically start reversing your age, you can go back to your prime and have children in your 60s, 70s, and 80s as if you're in your 20s. What I'm telling you is about, what I'm trying to tell you guys is that you have to get away from the belief that you can't because of the circumstances. That's just a belief. It doesn't matter how old you are. Look at what happened with Sarah. She was in her 90s. She laughed at God because she was like, no, I'm too old to have children. God was like, no, you're not. That's just what you believe. And pow, she had a son. Well, I've helped a lot of women conceive who said they couldn't conceive anymore. And my son was a part of that miracle. So based upon what your goals are, and yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you talk with a coach or you talk with me as a holistic doctor, and we discuss what your goals are, then I can say, well, you're probably going to need at least 3 cleanses this year. You're probably going to need 4, or you may only need just 2. And then as time goes on, if you keep at least 1 cleanse a year in your life, every time you cleanse, you're literally adding 10, 20, 15 years to your life. Every time you cleanse, it takes about 4 cleanses to reach 80% healing. So yes, you want to cleanse as often as you can until you're back to where you want to be, like I am. So I run college track and field. I'm in my 20s. I don't stop cleansing. No, I don't stop cleansing. I still cleanse because I want to stay in my 20s. In other words, every year I reset my biological age. I reset, just like a computer. You reset it back to its default, it's refurbished. You have to refurbish your body every year so that you'll stop aging, stop getting sick, and stop dying.
Okay, Eunice Hall asks, should we eat for our culture? I think I heard Dr. Sebi say that we are ill because we're eating other cultures' food, i.e. American, Italian, Mexican. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's too presumptuous because one, you have a vegan Asian food that I eat. Just last night, I was at a Mexican vegan restaurant eating vegan tacos. You see, so a lot of cultures are starting to go vegan. When you go vegan, that's a whole nother culture. Now, if I just went into a regular Mexican restaurant and I said, well, can you make this vegan? They're not really equipped to really make it vegan based upon my requirements. If I go into an Indian restaurant, there's only so much they can make it vegan. So veganism itself is a culture. So when different cultures start going vegan, they're conforming to what your body needs as a plant-based diet in order for you to live a longer life. You have to understand that Dr. Sebi and Dr. Africa, they were on the beginning and the pioneers of this, but they were still missing a lot of information. They didn't have this technology that I have brought to the surface. So therefore, we have more information to upgrade and update anything that they have put out there. So now it's about really fine tuning your diet. It was challenging for me to go to a restaurant and have them veganize something, because even when I went to an Asian restaurant and they did make it vegan, I found out later that the broth itself was a fish broth. So I wasn't even eating vegan. So you definitely, there's an app called happycow.com, happycow.com. And he's happy because ain't nobody eating him. That's why he's happy. So depending on what city you go to, you type in the zip code, and it'll pull up all of the vegan restaurants, all of the vegetarian restaurants, all of the vegan friendly restaurants in that whole area. And you'll be able to go from the top all the way down, and you'll be able to make your decision.
Okay.
Great.
Terry asks, would you recommend drinking almond milk? Is it good or bad for your body?
Almond milk is good. Well, almond milk, I will say this. If you can make your own almond milk, that's even better. If you can make your own nut milks, that's even better. That's pretty much where I'm going with this, where I'm gonna, where I'm ordering my own machine so I can make my own nut milks. It's much better than dairy. How long have you been doing dairy? We've been doing dairy, what, grammar school, high school? I used to love them chocolate milks in high school. Everybody fought over those chocolate milks, right? Because they was like rare. But the milk is what's causing mucus in our body. And that dairy mucus is causing our bodies to become more acidic. And when your body becomes acidic, it starts leaching calcium, potassium, and sodium to try to raise your pH back up. So anytime we eat dairy, we're damaging our body, because after 4 years of age, we all lose the enzyme lactase to break down lactose. So we're not at a certain age even breaking it down anymore. So that's why it's becoming acidic in our body, building up mucus. In fact, you guys, your body and its natural intelligence causes you to create colds and allergies in order to fight the dairy. So your body is creating a cold, it's creating an allergy in response to the dairy. But we were taught to battle the cold and the allergies with things like Claritin instead of just letting go of the dairy. You see? So we have to start straightening everything out. And as we do that, we realize that it's not as complicated as we thought. In fact, we're going to start to realize it's more illogical, unrational, and unreasonable the way we have been eating, because we just had no frame of reference. It's like trying to explain water to a fish. Fish, you can't explain it, even though they're surrounded by water, they don't understand because they don't have a frame of reference. We were born into a system just like the fish were born into water, and we don't have a frame of reference. So everything that's happening in that system, it just seems logical. It becomes our standard of rationale and reasoning. And then when you wake up, you realize, man, all that stuff was irrational and unreasonable. Right?
So
Dr.
we have
Chachi, go ahead.
Yes, we have this final question. Eunice Hall is asking, can this way of eating cure tinnitus and get your lost taste and smell back?
Yes. So if you lost your taste and smell during COVID, yes. In fact, there's really not one incurable disease that cannot be reversed and restored. And reason being is because when your body is toxic, when your body is degenerating, you start to downregulate your genes and you start creating defective protein. If you keep on creating defective protein, then remember what I said, every 7 to 10 years, you get a brand new body. Well, if you're replacing those organs with defective protein, then you're going to have a defective body, and all type of stuff is going to start happening. You can go through an endless number of signs and symptoms and diseases, but it's really just based upon the degeneration process. So don't get specific as into what's happening to your body. Always understand the general issue, because over 150 diseases are linked to acidity in the body and oxygen deficiency. It doesn't matter what the diseases are, because all they are different categorical manifestations of toxic waste overload in the human body. All they are is different categories and orientations and manifestations of toxic waste overload in the body. It doesn't matter what the manifestation is. It's the fact as to what's causing that manifestation. Remember, we're genetically different from each other. So if I'm genetically different from you, there are things and ways that my body is going to express toxicity different from how your body expresses toxicity. The medical industry gets into the specifics of the condition, but they don't address the foundation of the toxicity. You see what I'm saying? We address the foundation. I'm able to eradicate about 3 different conditions in one body dealing with the underlying cause. If a person has diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, in 3 weeks, guess what? We're eradicating it, and we're not even addressing the medication. In fact, we're not even addressing the fact that this person has been on this medication for years or been on dialysis for 7 years. None of that matters. Once you understand that the body was designed to fully regenerate itself, all we have to do is identify and remove the obstacles to the body's healing process. And once you remove the obstacles, your body heals itself. We have to trust in what God put in us. We just have to be good stewards over it, and we have not been good stewards. So I'm the voice of reason to say, hey, we just need to return back to the garden. We need to get away from the animal proteins and start going more plant-based, like the gorillas, like the elephants, like the horses, and even the guy who's as strong as an ox. Ox don't eat meat either. All the animals that we associate with strength and power are not meat eaters. So how do we think that being manly is about eating meat when I'm helping guys get their erection up because I'm taking them off the animal protein for 3 weeks? The animal protein is causing them to lose their libido. That's not too manly. But when they come off the meat for 3 weeks, just in the first week, they're already telling me, and I hate to say that, we all adults here, but one gentleman who libido was just shot, his first testimony was that he was able to have sex for 30 minutes in his first week. That was his testimony. He was elated that he was able to, at least for 30 minutes. I know for some of you superheroes out there, that's small. I get it. But for a man who didn't have a libido at all, and he was able to go 30 minutes, man, he became a lifetime client, changed his diet, and he never went back. So what I'm saying is that
that's a zero to hero testimony.
I bet he didn't go back.
I'm telling you, from zero. That usually in car commercials it's 0 to 60. For him, it was 0 to 30.
Right. Oh, man. Absolutely. Wow. Well, you have been so sharing, so thoughtful, so helpful. It's just been an honor to be in your presence and to have all of these questions answered. And I'm sure the audience is elated that you are here today and able to answer the questions. And there probably needs to be a part 2 because there was just so much information. There probably needs to be a part 2. Would you mind sharing with us how, if anybody's interested in working with you, interested in the bioscan, interested in anything you said today and maybe wants to follow up, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I'm gonna give you, for you guys that are on here, take down this number. You can reach me. You can text me because this is a line that I use so that people can at least let me know what's going on. Because what I'm finding out is that if you are not dealing with something, everyone knows somebody else who's dealing with something, whether it's a degenerative condition. It doesn't matter if they're 5 years of age. It doesn't matter if they're 80 years of age. We can help anybody now as long as they have the support and as long as they have the will to live. That's going to be important. So if you have a sister or brother that's dealing with stage 4 cancer, we need to get on a 3-way call, and Anita and Fred is going to be there with me because they're the ones that brought me into this. We're going to be on that 3-way call as a team of people that look like us, a team of people that love us. And we're going to be able to help those people by coming up with a solid plan. The number is 773-851-8756. That's 773-851-8756. You can put it in the chat if you want to. If you do call, make sure if you don't get a voicemail, if it's full, send a text. Send a text. Let them know. Say, hey, I heard you on the webinar. My sister has cancer. When can we set up a conference call to talk to her to see if she's interested in a holistic process? Because we may want to save them, but they have to be willing to want to take a different approach. Because if they don't, not even Jesus can help them. Okay. 773-851-8756. And we have coaches all over the country. So depending on where you are, you may have to take a short trip. You may have to take a long trip, or you may not have to take a trip at all, depending on how close a wellness coach to you. But I will open up this offer for the people that are interested and making holistic health a career. The wealth of the medical industry is starting to pour into holistic health. And so, and if they're making trillions of dollars feeding you poison, and how much would you make by giving people the elixir of life? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, want to say again, Dr. Prince, thank you so much for taking the time out of your positive, productive schedule. On behalf of myself, Dr. Tachi, Dr. Boyce, Dr. Alicia, and all the family here, we want to make sure that you and your team make sure you don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and make sure you give yourselves grace. And if you have any more questions, please, the doctor has given his phone number, but if you have any for the Black Business Channel, email support@theblackbusinessschool.com. So good night, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you make your health your wealth.
Amen.
Dr. Vibe, Dr. Vibe,
Yes.
Dr. Vibe. I want to say one more thing.
Sure.
For the people that are listening, we will do a part 2. When we do a part 2, whoever, I don't know if they can, but whoever you know that's a part of the part of this, the B1 family or the families of them, try to get them on that call so that we can really start to get them that information. Because a lot of times when you try to explain something to them, it just don't come in right. They be like, no, I don't know. That don't make sense to them. But when you put them on the line with us and we start talking about it, then it's going to be absorbed into their mind. So yes, we will have a part 2. And we will continue to help and save our people. So God bless you all. May the Lord bless you and keep you, cause his light to shine upon you, be gracious to you, show you favor, and grant you everlasting peace.
Absolutely. And also, big thank you to Chanel, who was managing all of this. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chanel.
Yes,
Thank
Chanel.
you so much. God bless you. Good night, everybody.